One question that kids always get is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this week's podcast, Lingokids Growin Up, does a great job helping them and their parents learn about all of the cool things people can do as a profession. I'm Andy Smiley, the Friendly Podcast Guide. I'm a mom who has used podcasts to fight the boredom and loneliness of motherhood, and now I want to help you find a podcast that can do the same thing for you. It can be overwhelming to try and find a podcast you'll enjoy in the thousands of shows that are out there. That's where I come in. My episodes are short and they answer all of the questions you'll have about the podcast, so you'll know if it's a good fit for you or not. I'm here to help you find a podcast you'll love without wasting your time. Now, let's talk podcasts. The Lingokids team describes Growin Up like this. It's an award-winning podcast for kids that can spark children's imagination to answer one question we all had at least once. What should I be when I grow up? Join us in this interactive audio journey where we combine fun with learning to ignite kids' minds. Meet inspiring grown-ups and learn all about their jobs. The length of each episode is about 15 minutes. The series is ongoing with new episodes available on Fridays. They just wrapped up their first season of episodes, so right now is the perfect time to catch up before they start the next season. Before we learn more about the vibe of the show, we're going to take a quick break to talk about my guide to kid podcasts. One of my favorite parenting tools is kid podcasts. I use them when I'm running errands with the kiddos to keep them from complaining the whole time, or when I need a mom break, I'll just grab an easy activity like coloring pages or a sensory bin, turn on a kid podcast, and the kids will be entertained for at least half an hour. I know that kid podcasts would help you in your life too, which is why I made a guide to kid podcasts. There are 8 categories ranging from science to mindfulness to audio drama, with at least 3 podcasts in each category. There are 27 podcasts in total on the guide. I've listened to each of the podcasts on this guide, so I can attest to them being kid-friendly. And I put my email at the bottom of the guide so that if you try a couple with your kids and none of them are a good fit, you can email me and I will personally help you find a kid podcast that works for your littles and you. You can grab this guide at the link in the show notes. Now we get to hear from Olga Klepova, one of the producers of Growin Up, as she talks about the inspiration for this show and describes the vibe of the show in an interesting way. Olga, thank you so much for being on our show today to talk about Lingokids Growin Up. I am really excited. It is a favorite at our house right now. But before we dive in, can you introduce yourself to my listeners a little bit?
Sure. Thanks, Andy, for having me. My pleasure. So my name is Olga Klepova, or Klepova, which is a bit harder for English speakers to pronounce. I've started my journey in the kids podcasting about a year and a half ago. That's when I joined Lingokids. That's the company that helps kids grow into amazing human beings. And I joined them as a podcast producer, right? So they wanted to create a podcast for kids that would, tick all the boxes for them to be educational, fun, entertaining, something fresh, something new. So that's how I started with kids podcasting. But before that, I was doing all sorts of different podcasts, including podcasts for defense, podcast for news, podcast about art, sport, you name it. And I fell in love with audio production and audio storytelling.
I love that. So why did you and the team start Growin Up? Like what made you all want to start that podcast specifically?
Oh, to be honest, there are multiple layers. One, of course, because I'm the part of the team, as a Lingo Kid. So we wanted to create something that would, talk to our mission, vision. So it had to represent Lingo Kids, right? So that's the first thing. We had to tick that box. The second box is when you start the podcast, you want to create something amazing, right? You want to create a good product that will be listened by millions and millions of people around the world, that will be shared by billions and what's not. So it had to be an original idea. And third thing, I guess, maybe it's even, the most important thing. I sort of sat back and looked and what I wanted to do as a podcast producer. What could I bring as Olga Klepova to Lingokids and to kids podcasting world, if you like. And I think I went back to my childhood, actually. And so listening to vinyl was one of my favorite things. And it was co-listening, if you like, because my mom would put, fairy tales, story time, songs, just biographies, what's not. So there would be a vinyl playing. I would be playing games with my mom, building castles, I don't know, playing even cards. That sound was always around me. And I really enjoyed that experience as a kid. That was one thing. And the second one, as a kid and right into my adulthood, I was always wondering what I wanted to do as Olga. What was my profession? What inspired me? So, and I thought that's something that kids actually tend to ask for many, many years. So why don't we dig into that? Why don't we bring this experience that I cherish so much, and I think so many kids do cherish, this this activity that can be shared between a kid and their parent. So it was about creating a podcast that could be listened by both, that could be interested for both. So that's a different kind of challenge, if you like, when you talk about kids podcasts. How do you create something that could be enjoyed by a kid and their parent? And that's how we came up with this idea. Okay, let's do a podcast when we will talk about professions. We'll talk about not just from fun and interactive point of view, but also we'll bring facts, information. That's something that adults don't even know. Long story short, it was something that inspired me, and then it inspired my team so much that we thought, okay, let's give it a go.
I love that. And I think adults don't really have the opportunity to learn about other professions, right? Especially like stay-at-home parents like me. I'm, raising children. I don't have time to go and talk to a bunch of other adults who are doing cool things. So this is a fun way for me also to learn about things that I probably wouldn't be able to learn about. So yeah, our whole family really likes this podcast. So we're grateful to you.
Thank you.
So I feel like you touched on it, like helping kids learn about professions, but do you want to dive, and parents, do you want to dive a little deeper into what you want kids and their parents to get out of the podcast?
Look, this is actually a fantastic question. What's the main takeaway? What we want this takeaway to be? I think it's the inspiration, if I'm brutally honest. I really want to inspire kids to, so they are exposed, ultimately they're exposed to a huge plethora of different people, of different professions who share their passion, like genuinely, openly, and kids get inspired, I guess, because they're like, oh my God, this vet he sounds super cool. And if I'm gonna dive into veterinary, I might travel to Africa. I might, I don't know, cure elephants, treat elephants and rhinoceros. So this inspiration, I expect to be translated from our guests, who are real professionals, right? So these are real people. They are real dancers, police officers, game designers who come to our show and share those passion. They share skills they needed to become who they are today, or skills they think kids might try to develop, if they're interested in this profession. And see, I'm trying to avoid the word career. I'm not sure kids would relate to the word career when they are 5, 6, 7. So for me, it is about discovering your passion, discovering, if you like, your superpower, and working hard on it if you want to, of course. So yes, I guess inspiration is the first thing.
That's fabulous. I want my kids to be inspired. So I love that that's the goal, is to just help kids know they can do whatever they want. And if that is being an astronaut, great. If that's being a geologist, cool. You can do whatever as long as you work for it and you can make it happen. That's fabulous. So how would you describe the feeling or like the vibe of your show?
Well, we try hard to make it fun. And I guess one of the key elements is our host. Her name is Emily Calandrelli. She's fantastic. She is a MIT engineer, and she's also Emmy-nominated TV presenter. She had her own show on Netflix for kids about science and science experiments. She just translates this positive energy and fun vibe, and she's really passionate about STEM as well. So this is probably first and far most important impression, if you like, that would come from the podcast. What else? I'm hoping that the other part is, maybe this word is not really for kids, but credibility. Mm-hmm. Because we do invite these real people to share their real stories, and they credible sources of information. So maybe that's the other part. I think these two make a really nice duet, if you like.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, fun, but also real, like credible sources that are telling you what really goes on. So that's a fun description of the vibe. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you what your favorite episode is in a second, which I know is hard. So I'm going to give you a second to think about it. While you're thinking, can you tell me where can people find Lingokids and then specifically Growing Up?
Sure thing. Well, we made sure to be available on every single platform. So if you start typing Lingokids, you probably will see several different shows, because we do produce other shows as well, but they're for different ages. They have different vibe, right? And it's a whole different story. But if you start typing Lingokids, you'll find Growing Up as well amongst those. I would say Growing Up is a perfect podcast for audience ages. If I had to narrow it down, I'd say 5 to 9. 5 to 9. That these are our age group.
Fabulous. And I'm assuming Lingokids has a website and social media. Can you tell me what those are too?
That would be as simple as lingokids.com, for example. That would be the website, and the social media would be at Lingokids. So yeah, we are everywhere on Instagram, on YouTube. We also uploading all our podcasts to YouTube. So now with often parents do opt in for some visuals to be present. It's an interesting field, right? We are witnessing as it unfolds at the moment. So we're trying to be there for those who need us.
Definitely. We're just trying to reach kids where they are, right? Or parents where they are. And sometimes that's YouTube and sometimes that's on a podcast app.
Yeah. Honestly, it depends on actually who we're talking to. So when it comes to podcast apps, platforms, mainly it will be parents who set up the channel and put the audio on. But if you talk about YouTube, you'll find out that kids mainly manage their own channels. So as soon as they get the gadget, they can navigate through. They know how to search for things. It better than you and I.
Yes, we live in an interesting day and age that I feel like my 5-year-old is almost as good at technology as I am. So it's a little bit crazy, but here we are. Okay, now can you tell me your favorite episode or a couple of episodes? Because I know it's hard to choose just one.
I'm okay to choose just one.
Okay, fabulous.
And it's not about prioritizing someone, or it's just things that I learned through that episode. It's the episode how to become a scientist. So I got to interview a real ornithologist, and it probably was the first time I interviewed or I met an ornithologist, Karina Newsom. She was so passionate about things she's doing to, help protect the birds in this world, and sharing the tips what kids, like real kids, can do in their real life to help birds during, for example, migration period. That I was just fascinated. I was struggling to answer questions because every time she'd finish her answer, I would be gobsmacked, like, oh my God, what I've just heard. So I loved it. She was contagious with her passion for birds, which is not really my thing. So after I listened to it, I'm like, oh my God, birds are amazing. I'm gonna go out and look for birds now. So I guess that was my favorite.
That is lovely. I love talking to people who are passionate about what they do. It just makes it just makes for a fabulous conversation or a listening experience if we're listening to a podcast. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. I'm definitely adding that to the list in the show notes so that people can jump straight to it and show their kids.
Sure. Thanks.
Is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't touched on yet?
I guess I'd like to add something about how passionate I feel about producing podcasts for kids. Maybe this is something I haven't touched on. And honestly, I've discovered this passion for content for kids as something totally new to me. Like if someone had told me, okay, you're going to work in the kids space and creating content for kids a couple of years ago, I would not believe them because I thought, you know what, I'm working in defense, writing about missiles and what's not. Like these are two completely different worlds. And gosh, it's so rewarding. And as of this year, we started receiving real feedback from kids and parents. And sometimes it makes me cry when they share like true emotions and feelings that our episodes generated in them. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. They share the drawing, they share poems. So we ask them to share a poem with us or try to write a poem. And, they sing along, they put videos on social media and tag us, like when we teach kids about how to do sustainable fashion, for example, how to reuse your clothes, and they do it. And so I feel it's really rewarding. And I can see the impact by the work I'm doing. So I'm loving it.
That's amazing. I love kid podcasts. We found them. Well, I guess I found them a little over a year ago. I guess it's been almost 2 years now. Wow, that's crazy. And when we found them, it was just like this whole new world. And I use kid podcasts daily to keep my kids entertained. If it's like in the car or if I need a break, I can turn a kid podcast on and like give them some coloring pages and they will just go to town for like 30 minutes. So I get like 30 minutes all to myself. It's glorious, like while the kids are awake. So I feel like kid podcasts have just made their imaginations explode. They've made just our household like a more peaceful place. There's less screens. It's just glorious. So I'm so grateful for what you do. We love kid podcasts and we love the people that make them. So thank you.
Andy, thank you so much for this opportunity. I loved chatting to you about things I do.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you know someone or a family who could use Lingokids Growin Up in their life, will you share this episode with them? Also, if you want to learn about more kid podcasts, grab my kid podcast guide. Talk to you soon. But really, thank you so much. We really do listen to kid podcasts every day. And I am so grateful for kid podcasts. They make, or especially like road trips. Oh my gosh. Road trips before kid podcasts were the worst. Yeah.
Honestly, for road trips, even if I don't have kids in the car, I still preload podcasts when I go to a place where, for example, there are problems with the internet connection.
Right.
And I listen to them. I love it.